Howdy, everybody. Today is Tuesday, January 11th, and the time is 5:30 p.m. We're here for the regular session of the Coppell City Council, and there is a quorum present, so I'm calling the meeting to order. We are convening into executive session on the first floor conference room, and I will be out to announce the opening of work session when executive session is over. Thank you for attending, and see you in a bit. The time is 6:24. We have adjourned from executive session and we're moving into work session in the first floor conference room. The public is invited to attend.
Tried that on my kids.
Stop, whatever's in the air.
Whatever's in the air. I know that.
I know it does, doesn't it?
Especially when it's
Smoke?
Yeah.
You smell it?
even with this on.
Was it the sternum? The sternum.
Right.
Cutting on a pot of coffee.
It is. It's a wave of emotions, right?
My smart
All right, guys, let's get moving into work
decided to
session.
lower the temperature during the evening. So we woke up like kind of cold. My wife's like, "It's kind of cold." And I was like, "Yeah, it is." So I kind of have a little sniffle. So I don't want to.
It's everywhere.
Item A is discussion on regarding agenda items. Does anybody have anything to bring up on the agenda? I had one item and the version of the agenda I got didn't give the details, but I was curious about the replacement of the floor and the core, and I found out it was water damage. So once I figured that out, it was like, okay, I understand. So that was the only one I had. John?
I have a couple of questions on item B, actually all B, C, and D. Sorry. on B, does that?
Yeah, Steve's here, but you need, what's the question?
So on the quote, I know the total amount that we had on the memo, it says 99,385, but it also has the add-on, I guess the tarpaulin underlayment. Is that something that we're considering to add on ourselves, or is that just an option that the?
What that is an option that they gave. Once they pull off the floor, they will measure the amount of moisture in the concrete. And then at that point, they'll make a recommendation as to whether or not we need that barrier or it's not needed. And at that point, the city would have to pay for that if we made the decision to install it, as the TMLR will only pay for what is actually there currently.
Okay, so that's what I was wondering about, because it has there, but I didn't know whether as an additional option that they will cover, or we have to go ahead and cover ourselves if we end up just doing it. Okay, that's all I had on that one. Thank you.
Okay, and then you had a question on C?
On C, I just had a question about, I know that the current equipment is coming to an end of life. Are we trying to recuperate anything from trading or anything to that effect? By any chance, do we know?
No, the Panasonics that we currently have are several years old. So I mean, what we do with all our old assets is there's a company that comes in that we sell the assets back to, so we do recoup
So we do
a little bit of cost, but by the time they scrub the hard drives, clean it out, give us the certification, it's not a lot of recuperation. We do it all assets.
Thank you. And then on D, I actually had a question with Bob. He's not here.
He is online.
Oh, he's on there? Okay.
Yeah.
I actually had a question with Bob and maybe Mike also. Let me pull up D real quick. On the contract itself, Bob, on the termination,
Yes,
the second paragraph, I guess it talks about termination without cause,
yes,
and it's talking about 90 days prior to, written notice, so and so and so. But then on the first paragraph, it's actually talking about, the way I'm saying it is termination with cause, is that correct?
yes,
But this actually talks about, I mean, I know we have a good relationship with the Chamber of Commerce and so, but it talks about how if they fail to, in the event that they fail to fulfill and violate any covenants, that we have the right to terminate, but we have to give at least 180 days before the effective date? Is that, are we okay with that?
yeah. The whole idea is so that if the project is not renewed next year, that they're given an opportunity to seek other funding on that. But if they're just non-compliant, we wanted the ability to terminate the agreement immediately. So one was just that prospectively, we would hope that there, in these kinds of grants and these kinds of contracts, that we have an ongoing relationship with them, assuming that we're collecting hotel motel taxes and promote this in the future. That's why there's that cancellation. So from funding and budgeting and those kinds of standpoint, if we're not going to have that and they want to continue this program, that they would give them ample opportunity to seek other funding. And it's not uncommon in these kinds of agreements with the Chamber of Commerce or anybody that we would have an ongoing relationship, community theater, et cetera, that we're making grants to have that 6-month clause in there. So that was the purpose for that, versus they just weren't behaving themselves and we wanted to cut the funding and the relationship immediately.
Okay, so basically we're okay with that 6 months.
Yeah, the other side of that too is when you put them on notice, it gives them time to correct. So that, the idea is to fix it.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, when they, I was just wondering, because when they fail to do things, I just thought, why do we want to get 6 months? And we want to hurry up and move on or something, but, okay.
And if there's something in the contract that's not working, maybe we bring back the contract and make some adjustments accordingly.
That's all I have.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cliff?
Yes, I guess this is directed both to Bob and to the city manager. The question is, are these not the kinds of contracts that we write with these folks that we know and like the historical society and those kind of folks? They're tailored to whatever they want to do, but this is typical. I'm assuming this one is typical of what we do with the other organizations that we contract with from time to
Yeah,
time.
the chamber contracts are typically a little bit more detailed, just
Mhm.
because of the expectations, so that's why there's more specificity in them. But for the others, it's a grant and they provide the financials, so it's still asking for the same type of information, but not as much as far as, in this particular instance, the reporting, as an example. We talked about that the last time.
Mhm.
And just there's just a higher degree of accountability in these kind of contracts than there are for, say, for the Historical Society
Yeah.
or for the arts groups that we fund.
I would agree with Mike's assessment on that. Plus, fact, this is the first time that we've had this kind of agreement with the
This
chamber,
specific.
so we worked with them, and they were more than willing to provide this level of detail, since we've never worked with them on this kind of contract. So this one is a little bit more thorough than what you're maybe commonly seeing with some of our other agreements, where we've had a longer-term relationship about the kind of project that they're undertaking, to Mike's point. Thank you.
Any other agenda items? Thank you, everybody. Let's move on to item B, discussion regarding the Coppell Chamber of Commerce contract.
Knowing that y'all just went through it, the brief summary is, in the memo, it's outlined within the contract in terms of, here's what the expectations are for the level of service, here's what the expectations are related to the reporting, and then here's what's expected as far as we're concerned, as far as what we're providing them for the funding. And the one thing is, this is for a 12-month period, so it's January through, I'll just say February, or February through January, understanding that you'll be in the budget process this coming year, and you'll be talking about, how's progress going on that, and then how do we look forward and budget accordingly for the next year, so that you won't necessarily be amending the budget like we're going to be doing this year to reflect this change. So that's just a heads up of what will happen during June when we're having the budget workshops and everything along those lines. So if you have any questions about what's in the contract, the chamber is here to talk about the services that they'll provide. You have questions?
Oh, yeah, Mayor Pro Tem.
I don't have any questions about the contract details, but when we do consent agenda item for D, I would like to ask a question in the public to just give a brief overview of what we're doing with the chamber. I think it's important for our business community to hear what we're investing in and how we're working together and partnering.
Probably would just be easiest to pull that off consent. And let
Happy
them
to do
address
that.
it. Okay,
Yep.
we can do that.
You can do it that way, or you can entertain a brief overview of agenda item 8, D, at the time of the consent agenda, and then receive the explanation, and then entertain a motion to approve the agenda. It's at the mayor's discretion.
Yeah, however you want to do it. I just wanted Ellie to know, and if you were okay with that.
Will you be prepared to make some comments?
Today,
Yes.
tonight?
Just a quick, just honestly, it's just a high level, quick, like, this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Biju?
Yeah, just a question for Mike. Normally we get a update at the end of the 12 months, how we did with this project or how this experiment. Can we have like a written report?
When she submits the quarterly reports, we can include it as part of your packets.
Thank you.
Yeah. So her quarterly reports means it'll come the following month, then, just the way the council meeting works.
Don?
Quickly, I was looking through the contract and did not see it, but I know everything has to conform to HOT funds. It has to be, everything that's expended has to be
Correct.
funded by HOT. What happens if by chance something doesn't? I mean,
Well, that's part of the audit process.
Okay.
And so finance department will take a look at it, working with Ellie on, okay, this doesn't necessarily meet, so that doesn't qualify. And in there, it talks about, those funds have to be deposited in its own special fund and accounted for accordingly. And so that's part of the report that she gives, is what it's for and what its purpose. And if something pops, we'll just have to identify it and say, okay.
And deal with it at that
Deal with
point
it at
of
that point in
how
time.
it's going to get funded.
Right.
Right. If it doesn't qualify. Okay. All right.
And the great thing is, to Councilman Matthews' point, y'all are gonna see the quarterly report too, so you're gonna see the same thing we will.
Right. All right.
Everybody good with that? All right. Moving on, item C, discussion regarding the American Rescue Plan. Ms. Leach.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I am pleased to be here this evening to walk through the prioritization summary that you all, as the council, completed over the holidays related to the potential projects that are on the table for ARP funding. There we go. So this evening, we'll be going over those rankings, and those rankings really are, it's relative priority. So everything that's on that list is an important project. So there are no unimportant projects, even if, as we're looking through those priorities, there will be something at the bottom of that list, but that does not necessarily mean it's not an important project. When we talk about the summary, there was high consensus at the council level around the social services and supporting our existing businesses. And so we'll walk through where, as a group, collectively, the council landed on the prioritization. We'll open it up for some discussion around how the council would like to move forward in terms of kind of a finalized list of projects for the first allocation that we have received. And then we'll kind of talk about the timeline on when we would need to obligate and spend those funds as we move forward for the list that we've decided on, if that's where we land this evening. Okay, I did a test on this, and it is a little bit small, so I apologize. So this is just a screenshot of the final rankings of the projects that were included for consideration. What we asked the council to do was prioritize those either as a 7, which meant it was a very high priority, a 4, which was kind of medium, or a 1, which was kind of the lower end of our priorities. And so you'll see clearly MetroCrest supplemental funding, the Woven Health Clinic, and our rent assistance for our businesses, top 3 in terms of the priorities there. I want to bring your attention to the very far right column that says cumulative total. And so that is just a running total of the projects as we start moving down that priority list. I've highlighted down to item number 4 for Magnolia Park Trail. So that's essentially where we have money that we would be able to fund with our very first allocation, knowing that 4.375 is a little bit more than the 4.2 that we have available, but we would likely juggle the rental assistance and kind of move money around if that first 4 projects are where the council would like to land. One of the things that is important, at least from a discussion standpoint for council, anything that is in blue font with the asterisk means that that is a project that is currently funded today in our existing city budget. So one of the things that we heard from council is, hey, go back and look and see what is eligible that we've already got on the books that we could apply these funds towards. And so those blue items represent those things that are currently funded. Or they're included in our 5-year forecast, or they're included in our assigned fund balance. And so essentially what those blue items represent is a lot of flexibility in terms of being able to juggle and move some of those either up the list or down the list to free up funds for maybe some of the other projects that may not already be funded in our budget. So for example, if you look at Deforest and Magnolia, those are both currently in blue. Should council decide to move a couple projects up in priority, we have some flexibility to play with some of those other projects and continue to move forward with those projects that are in blue. So anything that's in blue today, we, in theory, could move all of those down to the very bottom, and it wouldn't mean that we are not moving forward with those projects because they're already included in our budget and our planning. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any clarification questions that you all have related to the prioritization and the projects. I've got a team of much smarter people than me that will be able to help us if we have really specific questions about any one of those projects. I should be able to answer some of it, but none of us are successful alone, so I do have a team here to help us. Correct. Yes, it is included in our, yes, okay. And just to clarify, so the Deforest lift station, that is included in our water and sewer fund rate study, and so that is incorporated into the our bond and capital spending plan for that water and sewer fund. And so again, it's in blue. It represents flexibility for the council if we wanted to move that particular project. The reason it's included here is the ARP funds allow us to accelerate that project. Currently, if we left it alone and it's in the water and sewer fund in its current iteration, we would not address that until fiscal year 25-26. And so what this does is it allows us to accelerate that. I do want to also note that by not accelerating it, we are not placing the city in jeopardy in terms of the maintenance and upkeep of that facility. So this just allows us to move faster. So I'll answer any questions that you all have here, and then open it up for conversation amongst council in terms of how you'd like to see us proceed forward from a priority perspective.
Don?
Real quick, clarification, like so the ones in blue are already accounted for somewhere, right?
Yes.
They're already on a list.
Yes.
Are they on a list at these amounts that you have listed here? And the one in particular I was curious about is Magnolia.
Magnolia.
Because I would have thought that there were 2 or 3 different options. So what have we, I guess, earmarked in our finances or in our budget versus what the number is here?
Correct. So that is one of the only ones that's a little bit different.
Okay.
So in the CRDC assigned fund balance, you will see that item listed at 1.2.
Okay.
We've got it listed here at 1.5. It's clearly a conservative estimate, knowing that we have several alternatives that we are still kind of working through, and those will actually be brought to the council the second meeting in January, so the upcoming meeting. But that's the one that's different.
Okay. And one other question on like the Forest lift station. So you mentioned that's another 3 years out, 4 years out.
Yes.
It's on the plan. So if we did this now, we would free up funds, or we wouldn't take out bonds. Am I hearing that correctly?
I'm looking at Kent, because
Yeah.
the idea of,
If we paid for the forest out of here, what would we do what would the money be freed up from? Would we just not borrow as much? Would we accelerate other projects? And is that what?
Yeah, it would come out of our business plan for the water sewer. So we would, and I rely on Tim, we work together on
Sure.
that. But, as we get to that point where we need to move forward with that project, it's not a $10 million project like we look at for some of our bigger projects. So it's very possible we could get to that point and have cash available to actually just do that project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mark?
It's okay.
You said the Deforest lift station at 1.5 million was included in the rate study. Would it have any significant impact to the proposed rates, $1.5 million, if it was covered by ARPA?
I mean, 1% of would be probably like $190,000. So 1% of the, it's 1% increase is equal to 190,000. So a 1% increase would be 190,000. That's based on $19 million.
Across the board for the ratepayer?
Yeah, across the board.
That's, so when you ask in terms of significance.
Yes.
And then, I mean, we can come back to you and let you know as far as what's going on, but one of the things, I think Kent was just saying, oh, excuse me, it's the end of the day, is that another option on that for us is part of the retained earnings, because it's only $1.5 million. And so we'll have options that aren't necessarily bond-related options. So as long as, if we don't issue debt and we use retained earnings, then it doesn't necessarily have an impact, unless part of the business plan is to refuel our retained earnings. But that's what you have retained earnings for, to do capital-type projects. Does that help? It's a minimal impact, but I can tell you today what that, is it 20 cents a month, or, I don't know. I don't know the answer to the question.
I had a question on the available balance, 4.2 million.
Yes.
That number that we were allocated was 5.2, so
Yes.
we've already spent $1 million.
Close
Was
to
that
it.
the stuff that we spent, was that the funding that we spent during the COVID event, or where did that?
So we did spend $25,000 as our share for the mental health study that was with the Quad Cities. And then we authorized the one-time lump sum payment for employees back to March of '20.
Okay.
In lieu of raises last year.
Okay.
So those are the two expenditures that have been made out of this allocation this point. So that's our remaining balance.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Anybody have any other questions for Tracy? Okay, so you're looking for some direction on what you want us to do.
Yes.
Or what you want us to tell you to do.
Correct.
And to just add to that, so on Magnolia Park, in 2 weeks, the presentation, I'm looking around, but I believe the presentation is right.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm at Magnolia Park, so there's been those multiple, she just identified, we've set out in the CRDC, with those options, we're going to be coming together to present to you an option. It's going to be in this range, let's just say the dollar amount. And so this is how your consideration and your conversation. Because we know the CRDC, while everything's positive, because we continue to retain the sales tax, it's not been reduced. If you use ARP funds as opposed to using the CRDC fund balance, that helps preserve the CRDC fund balance longer as part of just the overall process, because the rule still hasn't taken into effect. We don't, if we're successful, the rule doesn't take into effect, and then we get to deal with it. But that's where, in your discussion, the options, the long-term, short-term, right, in terms of what's going on. So I'm just saying that to you because in 2 weeks, you're going to have an option. And you could say, okay, that's the solution that we want to go with. And then you could say, let's go ahead and use ARP funds or go forward with CRDC funds.
Don?
Apologies if you said this and I completely missed it, but there are, the things that are on here, such as fire station repairs, parking lot cover for police vehicles, fiber expansion, the LTE network, city LTE network.
Mm-hmm.
They're not in blue, so they are not accounted for currently.
Correct.
So these really would be additional or new sort
Yes.
of
Yes.
new projects that we have contemplated but have not moved to fund or anything. Is that-
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Anything that's in black font is not currently funded today.
Are those things that are, needed, required, I don't know what the right word is, but are those things that, I'm assuming they're not on a list because they are not high priority or they are not needed, they really are just bonus projects? I don't know if that's the right word.
No, so
A wish list of things that we would like to do.
So some of these projects are well beyond conceptual phase. So for example, We talk about the creek bank stabilization. That's a concept and idea that we're currently working through, just kind of vetting, right? Does the community have interest, the impacted homeowners, is there interest from those individuals if we had a program like that? So we're working our way through trying to understand what that might look like. The fire station repairs, that has been a project for all three, well, at the time it was the 3 stations. And Chief Richardson's been working with facilities for a number of years to identify short, medium, and long-term repairs that need to be made. We've been kind of working our way through those lists. The fiber expansion, we know that we're going to have to do that at some point. This provides us a vehicle to kind of accelerate that process. The pavement replacing at Creekview, that's been a project that we've been working with the HOA on as a concept on they're wanting to improve their entryway, the paving part of the drive surface needs to be addressed, and so in conjunction with their work, we were considering and contemplating this work. So these are projects that have been kind of, we've been thinking about, man, we would love to move forward with some of these projects. Funding, we just did not have a funding source for these until we had this opportunity.
But eventually, we would need to find a funding source, right, for
In
a lot of
time.
these, in time.
It would be in
over
time and
period.
prioritized,
Got
and
it.
yes.
And the last thing before y'all get into your discussion is, you're identifying the priorities. It starts to tell us the direction as projects come forward. But there's absolutely nothing in here that's rock solid that says if something else pops up, I don't know what that is. I have no idea. But 6 months down the road, 8 months down the road, or 9 months down the road, it's like, oh my gosh, we need, and because of revenue loss or whatever, and it would qualify, here's a fund we could go to that's not necessarily our general fund balance,
Okay.
right? So I think in answer to your question, just as an example, Tracy put that out last night, both MetroCrest and Woven, that's over the next 2 or 3 years. So you're not incurring a $375,000 cost in this particular year. But you would over the next, I think MetroCrest is 2 years, right?
Three,
It's
and
3
then
years.
Woven is 2.
Woven is 2, okay. So I'm just saying, you will still have flexibility
Okay.
through the ARP funds as things come. It's like, I mean, none of those dollars are spent, you know, that are on this sheet. And if you decide, I'll use this term again, if you decide to use Magnolia Park and you decide to use Moore Road Boardwalk, because it helps convert the CRDC, great. But those projects, even if they hadn't started, you know, any design work on Magnolia Park yet. It's all been preliminary. And you know, that process takes time, and then you have to bid it and everything along those lines. So you will still have time. So I don't want you to feel pressure. I just want you to be able to provide us the direction. You will still have time to modify as you go along.
Okay. And I'm assuming these funds are coming in, like $5 million or whatever's already coming in, they're just gonna sit in an
So they're in a
assigned fund.
There's
balance, is that-
there's assignment,
Yes.
right? And then when's the next, no, y'all just got notification. When's the next deposit? It's this fall, right?
It's
August.
like, yeah,
August of
Right.
22.
So by the end of 2022, roughly there'll be $9+ million
Just in an assigned fund balance. or-
setting an assigned fund balance that could be used for these things. And as you kind of go along, just like you did, you know, y'all, first you rated philosophically, then you got to see the dollar amounts that come to it. As you go along, you'll be greenlighting us different projects. The feedback we've gotten so far on the creekback stabilization has been positive, but there's some things that we've been talking about that may help that a little bit more. But again, that becomes, you know, we talked about what process, will that be a revolving loan, or will that be that type of situation? So, I mean, those are still things that, y'all aren't into the details yet. This is just, what we're asking you is, based on the input at the last time we got together, to focus on the social services, here are the various projects, is this list look like we're heading in the right direction for y'all? And if it is, we understand Metrocrest is a priority, Woven is a priority, Renaissance is a priority. I will tell you, each one of those is gonna take time. And there's only so much capacity.
Okay.
Magnolia Trail, y'all are, if you like that, in 2 weeks, you're gonna be able to make, you can make that decision and say, okay, this is where we wanna go, right? Moore Road, when it comes forward, you can make that decision, this is where we wanna go. If you like the creek stabilization, based on our initial work that we've done so far, then we go to work harder on it, right? Other than having personal meetings with property owners along the creeks. Does that help you? Okay.
It does.
Thank you for answering. My first question was going to be, when do we get the additional $5+ million? So thank you for answering that. Second thing is, what is the current funding mechanism for the Moore Road Park Boardwalk?
It's CRDC.
That is CRDC. Okay, all right. Thank you. Cannot remember from meetings in the past.
Done.
I'm curious, CRDC, things that would be in CRDC, or is it just those two? Is it just, what would be coming out of CRDC? I mean, you put it
On the list that's in front of you, it's just Magnolia and the Moore Road.
Okay. Those are
Park
the two
Boardwalk.
items that would
Yes.
currently be funded from there. Okay, so
Correct.
we would elongate their,
Fund balance.
yes, okay.
Anybody else?
One more thing, I'm sorry.
Don?
The ambulance replacement, where are we currently, is that assigned fund balance? Is that?
Actually,
Or is that in the?
there's two places. It's in the budget, and it's also part of the capital replacement fund.
Okay. I know y'all went over that.
Right.
But I was trying to recollect how
It's in
how
this
being
year's
funded.
budget, let's just say for the, I think the difference is what, about $300,000 to $400,000? Right.
Okay. Okay.
So as we started, if we chose to go down the list, kind of in priority order like listed here, and we got into a couple of the projects and found out that they were, for example, like Magnolia Park, were gonna be 1.2 instead of 1.5, we'd just be able to move further down the list.
It's, right, it stays in the pool.
Anybody have anything else? Don?
Well, I would, can I make, not a recommendation, but my thoughts, tell you what my thoughts, I mean, I guess I like, after hearing how Tracy's laid this all out, addressing the social services or the human services aspect like we have as a top priority, but then I think I like those couple of projects that are currently would be funded by CRDC, just to let that fund balance live a little bit longer, give us more flexibility, and that would sort of be my recommendation as far as priority. So those are my thoughts.
Well, the only one that wouldn't fit into that is, the fire department bunker gear. All the others would be covered by that.
Just say that again?
Well, when you look here, the only item is priority 6. We would be getting to the end of our funding somewhere in that block. So we'd be able to cover all of the existing funded projects.
I guess I was just saying, have those top priority.
Well,
but I mean,
they're already would be funded. Oh, I'm seeing, you're saying move like.
move Deforest down and more up is sort of what I was thinking. And it's just in order to keep that CRDC fund balance, give that a little bit more life.
Because keep in mind, from a timing standpoint, there will be 2 allocations. So we do have a deadline of December, the end of December 2024, to obligate the funding that we've received. So that's kind of like the drop dead on when we have to have certainty around what we're going to spend and what we're going to spend it on. And then we've got until end of December of 26 to actually get all that money out the door.
So does that meet your?
Yeah, just my thoughts, my recommendations, sort of how to approach it.
Kevin?
Mayor, what you're saying is that by the end of this year, we'll have the additional 5 million, right? So that's what takes it down to that, 1 through 6 priorities. And then we have until the end of 2024 to really lock in what we want to do with those funds and how we want to allocate it. All right, I just want to make sure, I think you guys are kind of saying the same thing, but I just wanted to reconcile that. So,
Thanks.
yeah, that's what I'm here for. Man of the people, that's what I do.
Is that clear enough?
Crystal.
Anybody else have thoughts?
Anybody have any other thoughts on how to handle it? I mean, I understand they're wanting to say, yes, this is what we're gonna do, but.
Right, well, I think what we'll do, Mayor, is we'll just start marching through and say, okay, we're about ready to go to design on this project, and this is where it's gonna be funded. Is that still confirming? So we're not gonna arbitrarily just start going around and do those kind of things. We'll just start walking our way through. Reason being is because, say, the fire department annual ambulance replacement and the fire department bunker gear, from a budget standpoint, those will start happening sooner because the process, it takes a while. And that's in this year's budget. And when it's time to award those projects, just depending on where we are, y'all can choose to say, okay, we want to do ARP, or no, we don't. Let's go ahead. We said we were in the budget. Let's do it. Right? But we'll just start marching through, and along the way, give you but this at least tells us, here's where we're going. That's what we're using this for.
Kevin?
Just one final thing. I know in the spreadsheet that there were, I couldn't remember if I saw this, but they were like, hey, do you have any other suggestions for things? Did anybody write anything in or anything like that?
No, we did not receive any additional submissions.
Okay, thank you.
John?
Yeah, thank you. So the ones that are not blue, obviously the blue ones, you said they're funded and basically it's a done deal pretty much, right? But the other ones that are not funded in black, was there a timeline that was gonna be actually looked into as far as when we might be thinking about budgeting for those?
No, they were all in various stages of vetting and due diligence. And so they were items that we had identified was a need. So for example, with the parking lot cover for the police vehicles, we've known that we've had to adjust how we handle that so that we can not destroy all of the equipment that's in there. This would have been really helpful, so we know that it was a potential solution to a problem that we had, kind of working our way through what could we do, and so the short answer is no, we did not have this line, all of those items in the black font. We did not have a schedule, for example, in a 5-year forecast that included all of these. These were items that fit the criteria for the ARP funding, but also met some of the needs that we were already contemplating.
And let me just add, from a budget standpoint, for example, let's just say after tonight, tomorrow, we're on the phone with Tracy, we're on the phone with Woven Health Clinic, and said, okay, the council's given us a green light to move forward. We put together an agreement like we've done before that would eventually come back to the council, so however long that takes, right, to get that to them. Because I think on Woven, the program is through September 30th, we're gonna lose the funding on it, so that's what this is for. So they don't really need it right now, but it's for the, for the next few years after that. MetroCrest is the same way, right? But, so pick reconfiguration of court clerk area. That's not something that, any work's really truly been done on. We could take the position that as we go through the budget process for next year, we budgeted accordingly for 22, 23, to say it the right way. And that's a way when y'all, when you finally approve the budget, then it's budgeted, there's ARP funds that are gonna be used for it, and then that goes forward that way. So that helps you in terms of, there'll be a methodical process.
Well, I say that because a lot of the things that's on here, and when I was kind of rating it, I was like, oh, this is as far as I know, this is already budgeted, or this is already,
Right.
and that's the way I was going with, but except some of them, I just wasn't sure
Right.
whether that was actually in plan, and if it was in plan, when were we thinking about putting these?
Right.
So that's why.
Another one I'll tell you that will, if with tonight's direction, I'll use the pop-up business support. Biddy's been doing research on it, but we haven't actually put anything meat to the bone. That's gonna take some time. And then once that program gets developed and everything, she knows, okay, I've got identified 500,000. As if you remember when the previous funds, we had a hard time getting the businesses to take the money. And so while we have this out here and she creates the program, it comes to council, y'all actually sign off on the program, and here's the allocation. And then we get to find out just how much the businesses really are gonna tap into it. Same way with the rental assistance, right? To your point, it could be a lower number, just based on what's happening in the market. And then that just gives those dollars different places to be allocated.
Well, you know, you're talking about duration of projects and timelines. The reconfiguration of the court clerk areas is something that I think that needs to occur quickly, otherwise it loses its impact.
Other purpose.
Yeah, its
Because of
purpose.
COVID.
Yeah, because of COVID. I
Right.
mean, if it doesn't occur until 3 years down the road, hopefully, you know, things are back to normal. I mean, we don't know for sure, but I mean, you would like to get that into place,
Sure.
you know, within a couple months, which I imagine you could probably.
The clerks will be very excited to
Yeah.
hear that. They're literally working right on top of each other
Yeah.
in a star
Right.
cubicle shape, and so they have no separation. So they would be very appreciative of that direction.
And, you know, when you talk about Deforest lift station already being in the budget, I could see taking $90,000 that was already allocated and shifting it around so you would do 1,410,000.
On the force.
Yeah, out of the Deforest, and do the balance of it out of what's already budgeted, so you could do the reconfiguration of the court clerk area.
Well, also, just to touch on that, you said that MetroCrest is over 3 years, so that's 125,000 each year, so,
There you go.
because you're gonna get that money.
Right, that's
Right.
the cumulative total is
But
just
yeah,
kind of, right,
so-
right, the cumulative total is
Exactly,
just, it was just.
but I mean, that's your 90,000 right
Right.
there,
Yeah.
is, based on the way that this chart is
Right,
formulated
right.
there, so,
There's ways for us to still slice and dice.
yes.
A lot of flexibility.
A lot of, right.
But
We're fortunate to receive it, but
I'd like to say, I do agree with Mark, if this is a very timely one, so I would recommend that one get moved up
Well,
as
we'll
quick
we'll
as
take,
possible,
we'll
so.
take the comment, just apply it to each one of them as far as, okay, which ones are the, yeah. For example, the pop-up business support is lower down below that number, but to get that going sooner,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Because that's what its purpose is. The same way with the, like the rental assistance, those almost go hand in hand.
Yep.
You're probably going to have the rental assistance funding sitting around for quite a while.
Well, at least through, well, it took a while to get that going before, so.
Anybody have anything else on this one? We do need to kind of be moving along unless there's a burning desire. Thank you. Item D, planning and zoning overview. Ms. Perone Boswell.
Good evening, Mayor, Council.
Good evening.
Bob's going to join me on this presentation. So we're looking to, let's see here. Okay, here we go.
Thanks, Mary. What we want to do is try to give you a quick 25,000-foot review of what land use regulations are that are commonly used in the cities, in particular the city of Coppell. Next slide. we're talking about three components of land use regulation. One is the comp plan, one is the zoning and the zoning ordinance, and three is planning and subdivisions. All three of these categories have specific chapters in the Texas Local Government Code which govern. And so we want to kind of address what these concepts, try to get into concepts in that particular zoning cases or particular area of town. Next slide. The first thing we want to talk about is the comprehensive plan. And you'll see that referred to in staff plans and comments from staff regarding a particular zoning case. The comp plan is a document that is governed under Chapter 213 of Local Government Code, and all cities are required to adopt a comp plan. We've had one for a number of years prior to it being required. And this is an overall planning tool to identify those areas of town where we would like things like our commercial zone, our residential areas, our multifamily residential areas, identified in broad general terms. And also things like our industrial use, highway-oriented businesses, and normal and everyday retail and office. One of the things we want, zoning regulations have to be adopted in accordance with the comp plan once they've been identified. So that answer is yes. And does the comp plan change zoning? The answer is no. Only the zoning ordinance changes the zoning. Next slide. The purpose of the comp plan is really an overall general to promote the health, safety, and welfare, to keep us free from fire and what they refer to as panic and other dangers, to lessen congestion, to provide for separation of uses in broad general terms, and also it includes us from creating overcrowding of both people and land uses themselves. And one of the most important elements of the comp plan, it incorporates your thoroughfare plan, your water and sewer long-range plan, where parks are located in the park plan, and other requirements that we incorporate into our comp plan. Next slide. So on any given basis, you'll see in the staff report whether the zoning application that's before you meets the comp plan. And there's two things that you can do that evening, assuming that we've done the required notices, is if a zoning application comes before us that does not comply with the comp plan, you should deny it. Or you could approve an amendment to the comp plan that evening and then approve the zoning case. And generally, those recommendations would be included in your staff report and in any ordinance that you would authorize for adoption. Next slide. We wanted to give you a very quick overview of what our town and city look like at various points in times, and how this has changed and where we are now with the comp plan. So if Mary, if you'll go through that, you can see we started out in 1936 with 400 people. In 1972 we had 1,800 people. In 1987 we had 50,000 people, not particularly. And then between 87 and 96 we had a huge explosion where the city almost doubled in size. And then basically where we are today, based on the census of your current comp plan. Those areas identified, as you'll recognize, the green spaces are our park system, the yellow spaces are our primary residential district, gray area is our primary industrial warehouse area, and then the brown sections are our commercial retail area, and then the red areas are identified as our highway-oriented that encompass 121 and 635. And with that, we'll kind of move to our next slide. And the city adopted their current 2011 comp plan that incorporates all these aspects and includes a map, which we've just shown you. And that comp plan becomes the underlying basis or the foundation upon which we would incorporate our zoning. Comp plans are normally routinely reviewed every 10 years, which we have routinely done through our 2030 and 2040 vision statements. So we currently have the 2020 vision statement, and this is where we envision our city going forward, and corresponding that would be appropriate for you, and it's in the city's work plan to bring that to you to begin to review the comp plan to see if there is required changes that need to be made. Obviously, new uses or different uses and different planning concepts come into play, which you would have the opportunity to then review and incorporate into our comp plan and then end up in the zoning. So I'll turn this over to Mary and have her talk to you about the overview of zoning. Here is our current future land use plan that we've referred to, and then Mary, if you would continue with talking about our zoning regulations.
Thank you, Bob. So why do zoning regulations exist? So the overall reason we have zoning regulations is to serve and protect health, safety, and welfare of the community and provide for orderly growth. 1916 saw the first zoning ordinance enacted in New York City. So what are zoning regulations? So the State Zoning Enabling Act regulates zoning and what municipalities can regulate. So typically, municipalities are allowed to regulate height, number of stories, size of the buildings, the percentage of the lot that can be occupied, the size of your yards in terms of the front, side, rear setbacks, population density, so single family versus multifamily, the location and use of buildings and other structures, land for business, industrial, residential, or other purposes. And B, in the case of designated places and areas of historical or cultural, architectural importance and significance, the governing body of municipality may regulate the construction, reconstruction, alteration, or raising of buildings and other structures. You can also regulate the bulk of buildings, essentially telling people what they can build, where they can build it, and what they can use it for. What zoning is not, is it's not about floor plans or the location of two competing businesses. So you can't look at a zoning and say, okay, we're doing townhouses or housing, I want to see the floor plan. I don't like those floor plans, so I don't allow these types of houses. That's not in your purview. So why do we zone? Because we want to encourage certain types of land use, manage density and traffic, promote health and safety, attract business and industry, protect the environment, and preserve the character of the neighborhood, and manage compatibility in neighborhoods. So overall, to create an attractive community. So in Coppell, we have more than 20 zoning districts. Zoning comes in the form of both a map and text component. So this is an example of a static map. So this is taken at a particular place and time. We also have interactive maps that are available online. In terms of the text portion, which is comprises of the zoning ordinance, so that way you can look up, single family 12, so SF 12, which means single family 12,000 square feet, and it'll have all the different components of that zoning category. One of the things I just wanted to mention is that some of the colors are pretty standard. So like residential is typically a yellow color, retail and commercial is typically some type of red or pinkish color, and gray usually represents some type of industrial. So our zoning ordinance is available online at municode.com. Municode.com does provide many municipalities throughout the country form a platform for presenting their ordinances, not only the zoning ordinance, but all other type of ordinances. So zoning map is very lot specific versus the feature land use map, which is somewhat schematic. So on this one here, you can go to a particular piece of property and see what that zoning is, and if there's specific regulations related to that zoning. So just to go over some of the zoning categories that we do have, like I said, we have over 20 zoning districts. So they range anywhere from agricultural zoning to various residential, like single-family estate, single-family 18, SF12, SF9, townhouse, multifamily. We also have historic, which is very specific to Old Town, and then moving into commercial zoning such as office, retail, commercial, highway commercial, town center, and light industrial. The zoning ordinance has districts, and within each district is spelled out the use, regulations, meaning what uses the property can be used for. They specify things such as maximum height regulations, the size of the yards, minimum lot size, width and depth, the area. For residential categories, talks about the minimum dwelling size that's required. Typical exclusions are the garage, breezeways, and porches. Usually talks about parking regulations, lot coverage, landscaping, lighting, exterior construction or materials. Commercial districts have additional regulations that speak to signage, outside storage, and display, and uses that are specifically not permitted, as well as uses that require an SUP, which is a special use permit. So there are some uses that are permitted in all districts. That includes churches, schools, and public spaces. So there are federal laws in place to protect religious institutions. RILUPA, which is the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Persons Act, was passed in 2000. Essentially requires government agencies to treat houses of worship as any other business. So basically they can go into any zoning district, but they must follow the zoning requirements of that district. For example, the setbacks and height requirements. Just going to give you a brief overview. This is kind of the point where council gets involved in the zoning process. So prior to bringing a development proposal before Planning and Zoning Commission and ultimately City Council, city staff will have met with various stakeholders, including property owners, developers, consultants, and members of the public, all with a vision of how they would like to see the property developed. While these visions and ideas may or may not materialize, there is a process that they all must go through and is regulated by state law. So once they submit a formal application, staff reviews the proposal. They will have submitted plans to show their proposal in terms of site layout, design, landscaping, parking, materials, elevations, tree mitigation. All zoning changes require a public hearing. State law requires that property owners within 200 feet of the subject property be notified. So we send out letters that state the requested zone change, provide a map of its location, and also provide a response form for property owners to send back to us to indicate if they would support, oppose, or are undecided about the request. And we also provide space for additional comments. In addition to the letter, a zoning change sign goes up on the property that states a zoning change is being requested and provides our phone number to call for more information. The City of Coppell goes above and beyond because we also send out courtesy notices to property owners within 800 feet. I'm sure you've heard me say that a few times during meetings. Planning and Zoning Commission are a recommending body to City Council. Typically, if P&Z makes a recommendation for approval, then a simple majority from City Council is all that is required to approve the zoning. If P&Z recommends denial of the request, then a supermajority is required for City Council to approve the zoning. And City Council does have the final decision-making process for zoning. Wanted to talk a little bit about special use permits and planned developments. So in the next couple slides, since these are the type of cases that you typically tend to see as we get built out. So certain uses may be allowed in certain zoning districts, but a special use permit may be required. So these uses are in general conformance with the master plan, but may require certain safeguards to protect adjoining property. So it's an overlay to the zoning district and allows the city to put specific conditions on the use. An example of that would be a drive-through restaurant, where the city can regulate the hours of operation and outdoor speakers. This is especially important when they're adjacent to residential neighborhoods. So any changes to the size, structural alterations, or modifications would require a new SUP. And then the second type of zoning that I like to talk about is planned developments. So you start off with a base zoning. Typically this is where you have deviations or exceptions from that base zoning. So part of the plan development would include, in most cases, the concept plan, development regulations, masonry and architectural regulations, tree preservation. So we've seen this quite a few times during council meetings. So what do PDs allow for? They allow for flexibility in the use and design of buildings and situations. PD may be used to permit new and innovative concepts in land utilization. Any major revision to the approved detailed plan which is not in conformance with the approved concept plan must be approved by City Council. However, minor revisions can be permitted upon approval by the Director of Community Development. So the city is almost built out. The majority of the remaining property with some requires some kind of exceptions, and that's why you tend to see the PDs come before you at City Council. So the regulations in the PD are for that property specifically.
All right, last, we're going to talk a little bit about planning. I've got 1 minute, and I'm going to go through this really quickly. The planning and what we talked about with the ordinance, the comp plan, and the zoning Mary just talked about are legislative acts which are completely within the discretion of the council to either approve or not approve, as long as it's not arbitrary and capricious and violates such things as spot zoning, which would be zoning that violates the comp plan. Platting, on the other hand, is more of an engineering and administrative document. We have a checklist of things based on the design of the lots, the size of the lots. They have to comply with the zoning, assuming they do. And the engineering department would review these through the DRC process to make sure that the lots are drained correctly, that the commercial developments have fire lanes and other issues regarding water and sewer and storm drainage, and as they come through. And if we get through that process, those subdivisions then would go for approval to the planning commission. They have the final authority on this, and you tend not to see these items. But this is deemed under state law to be an administrative process where you do not have discretion. That's why we have allowed the planning and zoning commission to put their eyes on it with the recommendation from staff, community development, and the engineering department that an actual lot, as it's developed, as it's zoned, and within the comp plan, has the correct technical aspects of the development, so that the development doesn't impair with other outlying properties and they're drained correctly, etc. There are state deadlines. Another reason why this is more an administrative function, that we have a thing called preliminary plat, final plat, and then minor plat. Without belaboring any of this, the whole idea, if it's just a minor tweak that needs a minor adjustment, it's done at the administrative level. If it's new development, it goes through the preliminary and final plat through our engineering department based on the ordinances that you've passed with design regulations and the technical requirements that's coming from engineering. So we just wanted to summarize this to give you a quick overview. You hear these concepts, we wanted to provide this to you so you understand what the conceptual elements are of our normal land use planning for you, to give you some overview. And then obviously we're running up on time, so that's really I alluded to earlier about drinking from a fire hose. You have now drank from the fire hose. We'll be happy to answer any questions. at the mayor and the manager's discretion to move on with your agenda. Thank you all very much for your attention tonight. Sorry that we went through fast, but we wanted to get this done for you.
Thank you, Bob.
Yes.
Yeah, we are at our allotted time. I would invite if anybody has any questions, direct your questions to Mary or Bob via email or phone, and they will be more than willing and happy to help you out. The time, thank you very much.
Yes.
The time is 7:33 p.m. and we're adjourned from work session. We will be convening into regular session in the council chambers. We have just adjourned from work session, and we're going to be moving into the regular session of the City Council in about 5 minutes at 7:40. Thank you.
Whatever that looks like, I support that. It's out there in California, it's actually yes. Getting married. Reconfiguring so we can spread out more stuff. Yeah, and so like, look, we can put up dividers if we need to, and it's all right there. You know. High school sweethearts and went to Stanford together.
Start without me, I have a quick.
Good evening, everybody. The time is 7:40 p.m. We're moving into the regular session of the Coppell City Council. Just as a reminder, citizens wanting to speak during our public hearings or during our citizens' appearance must sign the appropriate forms outside the council room doors, and please list your residence, your address. Tonight we have Pastor Steve Elkins with Coppell Bible Fellowship to give our invocation, and then we will recite the Pledge of Allegiance. So will everybody please stand. Pastor Steve.
Father, it's a great privilege to come before you and pray for this meeting and for these leaders. Lord, we do pray for the mayor, the city manager, the mayor pro tem, and all the members. Lord, help them be the leaders that we need to have in this area. We praise you for them, their hard work, their dedication, their sincerity, their loyalty. Lord, certainly their great work ethic. We pray your blessings on them and all their deliberations, the policies, the planning, the oversight that they're responsible for. Father, I pray that we can be a citizenry that helps them do what they do with great joy and not grievingly or begrudgingly, but thankfully. And I pray that we can work together as a great team. Father, we think of a great civic leader like Daniel in the Bible who had a more excellent, even a most excellent spirit within him. And we pray for that same spirit to be with each of these leaders as they deliberate and think and negotiate, make decisions, above all pray. And I pray that they would do these things in a way pleasing to you and that would help our community so much, Lord. Bless them, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Item number 6 is our citizens' appearance. Ms. Owens, I understand that we have 2 requests to have a record read in. Do we have any other person sign up for speaking?
No, sir, we do not.
If you would please read the 2 items into the record.
Okay. This email is from Mr. Ratna Vinagandla. We received this email on Friday, December 17th, 2021. I live in Coppell. I have 2 other homes, one 1,700 miles away and another just a mile away in Coppell. I can watch both homes with the security cameras. I can lock or unlock both homes remotely with smart locks. I can be alerted when garage doors are open. I can be alerted if there is any noise at the house. I can be alerted whenever a door is opened or closed. I can set temperature in the house, even at the home 1,700 miles away from me. The home that is so far away is in the heart of Silicon Valley, near Stanford, where the homes cost 10 times more than a comparable sized home in Coppell. So it is not some bad neighborhood, rather the most prestigious address one can have in the world. Both are rental homes. One city has a restriction that a short-term rental is prohibited unless the owner also has that home as its primary residence. The other city has no such restrictions. Guess which one is which? In any case, please update me if there are any changes to your years-old short-term rental outdated ordinance. Not that it matters much to me, but it should matter to you if you wish to come into current times. Best, Ratna. Then the second email that I received is from Karen Murdoch, and I received that today, January 11th. Hello, I heard rumblings when it was announced that Venki Venkatraman had been sworn in as a member of the Conduct Review Board. Feedback was that he has posted very negative racial postings on Facebook. My initial thought was that surely someone would not be allowed on a conduct review board if this were true. Then I saw screenshots of his postings. These are not mildly offensive postings, they are extremely disturbing. It's incredibly sad to me that anyone thinks this way, but to broadcast these views and then be allowed on a conduct review board is just shocking. I would implore that the mayor and council members rescind Mr. Venkatraman's participation on the board. No one with this mindset should be allowed on a conduct review board. In addition to the ethical issues, it seems quite obvious that his participation would be a major liability for the city. The city of Coppell prides itself on diversity and inclusiveness. Mr. Venkatraman's postings are a complete contradiction to these principles. Please stand up and reinforce that this shocking mindset in no way represents the citizens of Coppell. Thank you, Karen Murdoch, 463 Graham Drive in Coppell, Texas.
Thank you very much, Ashley.
welcome.
Item number 7 is a report by the City of Coppell, or from the City of Coppell, on their winter weather preparations by our Fire Chief, Kevin Richardson. Chief Richardson.
Good evening. Why are you laughing?
Well, the city manager was saying I needed to comment on your mustache, and I was
I know.
sitting here saying no.
I know it.
Very healthy. But it looks good.
I'm not a good loser. I lost the mustache competition, so
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm going to try to get there. So, well, good evening. I'm here this evening to spend a little bit of time to talk about our city's winter weather preparation. If I can get there we go. And our efforts in preparing for the season. I'd like to start off by giving a little background on how we got here. So, in the City of Coppell, the Emergency Management Division falls within the responsibility of the fire department. And when that happens, we utilize what we call an all hazards response model. So it's not just fire, rescue, and EMS and hazardous materials incidents and transportation. It also involves this environmental stuff that we're going to talk about this evening. We do that in a number of ways. We actually have some plans, and I want to talk through a couple of them. The first one is our Continuity of Operations Plan. We call it a COOP, C-O-O-P. And basically what a COOP is it provides us guidance on how we maintain government during the disaster. The other one is the Emergency Response Plan. That's what most people think is what we're doing, is that's our process to deal with the emergency itself. And I have some visuals here. The tornado there was from the city of Rowlett. And obviously they had both plans in action. They're trying to maintain operations for the government with infrastructure that was damaged, and they're also trying to manage the emergency response. And we had some firefighters that went down south to the floods a couple years ago and had that same situation where both plans were in place. And then, of course, in Texas, we had some significant winter weather last year. Each one of those plans has a specific annex for each incident. So we actually have a winter weather annex within our plan. It's very specific, it's very detailed. It's for all the individual city departments. It's just not a fire department thing. All city departments have responsibilities. It covers all the prevention activities, how we monitor what's going on, who's responsible for doing what, specifics on when the incident occurs, the emergency response portion of it, and then also follows up with recovery, and that's going to be documentation, recovery costs, grants, and things of that nature. So we do have a very specific plan. Typically what we do is during the summertime we pull the plan out for winter. We review it with all of our city departments. We start looking at what we need, supplies, place orders, other areas of concern, other things that we need to do. Start working on our communication posts and stuff like that. So it's very structured in how we respond for it. And then, of course, on the week of February 14, we had, there's all kinds of words, right? Snowmageddon, actually a word. I checked it in Wikipedia. Siri even had a definition. So, but we had extremely low temperatures that week. We experienced precipitation in the form of ice, sleet, and snow. That created an increased power demand that resulted in extended power outages, that resulted in extensive calls for service, and it occurred for a long period of time. It was a long week for the city, for sure. So I'll kind of talk our way through a little bit of that. We use what we call a ready, set, go model. The ready is exactly what it means. We keep it simple, where all the city departments are preparing. We're making our notifications. We're talking about it. We're getting our staffing levels ready. The set portion of it is where it's imminent, it's coming, and then go is actually when the incident happens, and we put the plan in place. We spend a lot of time working communication within the city, our city workers, our community, prior to and during the event. We ended up activating the Emergency Operations Center, sustained it for 7 days, 24 hours a day. The photograph here. When this was taken, we had 21 people working in different areas of the Emergency Operations Center. Basically, what we had was 12-hour operational periods that were very specific on what our objectives were. All city departments were represented and took care of business. During that time frame, we experienced over 700 calls for service, and that was very taxing on not only the emergency services, but the non-emergency services. Typically, when we get busy, we utilize our mutual aid agreements with our surrounding communities, but they were facing the same issues that we were. So we were pretty much on our own. And so we implemented a lot of things that helped us get through that, and we made some improvements this year as well, all while maintaining city government. Again, when the winter weather storm hit us, we did experience widespread power outages. These were extended without any reasoning. The priority grids were not maintained. This lack of heat created freezing water that led to more problems. One example, we had so many water leaks going at one time, we were concerned that we weren't going to be able to keep up with our water supply because it was leaking out faster than it was coming in. Some of these large warehouse districts that have large, high volume fire sprinkler heads, when they lost heat, some of that water froze and creates, and pipes burst. This photograph on the left is one of our businesses in town. It's a smaller business, but by the time we got there, trying to run through the rest of the calls, you can see the amount of water that had filled up inside the business. This was not, this was very common. And so we were chasing water leaks. And so we put some things in place. We had uncontrolled water leaks, large volumes of water. Then again, we had our increased emergency calls. So we had motor vehicle accidents, the normal slip, trips, and falls, hypothermia. We even had some animal rescues in play. We had, believe it or not, we had a horse in Coppell that had fell through some ice and got stuck, had to be rescued. It's just time consuming. We were able to do it, but it just was very time consuming. So we were taxed. We were actually receiving non-emergency type calls for information, just people want to know what's going on. They just wanted to know. And we were able to deal with some of that as well. We ended up having humanitarian efforts. We had senior centers that were without power for extended periods of time. We had apartments without running water because we had to shut the water off. So they had the entire apartment complexes without water. People were cold without heat. We ended up with people who didn't have transportation. They couldn't fill medications. They had oxygen bottles that needed to be replaced. So we had to implement some teams to go out and just do that. So we were faced with a number of challenges. Not to mention, if you think of the date, COVID was fixing to peak in the middle of this. So we actually had another plan in place because we have a COVID annex on how we're supposed to deal with pandemics. So that was already in play. So we're managing this incident plus the COVID incident at the same time. So in addition to all the normal things that most people would think of that we would do for preparations for the city, I'm going to cover a couple of specifics that played a big role in how we managed last year and some things we made improvements with. First, I'd like to talk about generators. Generators are tough. They have fuel, they got lines, they have freezing. We have testing procedures for them every month. They're not designed to run for long periods of time. If they do, we have to have fuel sources and for extended period of time. So we had to make a lot of adjustments. So as we stand today, all of our generators, and we have 19 or 20 large-scale generators that you see on the bottom left of the photograph that provide power to city facilities. They've all been fully tested under load. The fuel systems have been completely scrubbed, meaning they've been completely drained, cleaned out, all the filters and serviced. Any of the issues that we had with freezing, switching lines, and all of those things of that nature have all been since repaired. We were able to increase our fuel storage capacity to where we can maintain fuel for the generators and how we transport fuel, as well as the capacity. Our water pumping stations have been improved. Our facilities and fleet service guys have done a phenomenal job in preparing not only our city facilities. We had a couple facilities that had significant damage. And so we have since investigated what happened there and made all the necessary repairs to prevent that from happening again. The next item, talking about securing for supplies. If you're familiar with the supply chain, it's a big deal. And I will tell you that our staff jumped on it early, got what we needed, all of our ice melt, all of our roadway stuff, all the supplies and equipment that we need, we have on hand right now. One of the challenges we had was with fuel. You know, we have dedicated fuel vendors, but the problem was they couldn't get there. They couldn't drive. They couldn't get to us. And so we have since increased our fuel capacity on site and at the city. And we've worked with local vendors as far as utilizing some fuel at the stations and enhanced our procurement process. So we ended up buying fuel at the stations in their tanks on site, was what we were able to do. As far as our apparatus, again, our fleet service guys have done a phenomenal job getting not just the fire trucks and police cars ready, but all of the street crews apparatus have been serviced, and all the equipment's on there. The picture there, a lot of people don't realize we have a snow plow, we have spray rigs to get the ice melt stuff down properly. All of the generators have been serviced, and we actually had verified with Encore that the priority grid is accurate. So contrary to what a lot of people thought, 3 of our fire stations lost power, and I'm familiar with some hospitals that lost power. So although we're on priority grids, that wasn't maintained for whatever reason. And so we went back afterwards as part of our action to make sure that all of our critical infrastructure is on the priority grids, and that's where we stand today. Our communications group did a phenomenal job using all of our social media platforms during the event. Since then, we've also have a lot of information. We've already started for several months now, more frequent, updated. There's YouTubes, there's redundancy. Our IT department has went out and identified any points of failure that our connectivity systems have and have implemented corrective actions to prevent any of those. We're very IT dependent to make sure we don't have any issues there as well. From our emergency responders, that was a challenge for us as well. You got to remember, most of our firefighters don't live nearby, so getting them to work was a challenge. When they were here, we kept them here. But also remember, they have families too, and they were without heat and water as well, so we're trying to manage their families as well. And when they got here, you know, we have to make sure that we're self-sustainable because the grocery stores weren't open, restaurants weren't open, so we have to secure food and water and supplies for our crews. And so we're able to do that this year, utilizing military-grade meals ready to eat. There's pallets of water that we have available, so we're stocked up and ready to go so that we can make sure that we can provide our services. We did open a warming center last year at the Corps. That was new for us. We hadn't done that before. And there were there's some challenges with that when you have pets and children and security and things of that nature, but we worked through them. But since then, we've trained all of our people up. We've actually working on a MOU, or a memorandum of understanding, with the other Quad cities, our neighbors, to kind of help share resources in the event that we're not able to meet the demand, or we can share resources. We also had to step up our recovery efforts as well. This is the after-action piece where we have to ensure that the documentation unit has done their job. This is where we handle disaster declarations and FEMA forms and insurance claims and make sure that we're eligible for grants and reimbursement and all that kind of fun stuff. So we have a full team of folks who are trained up and ready to take care of that as well. The last one talks about improved work options. Again, we've become really good at remote working, obviously. Between virtual access, we're able to maintain government. We've spent a lot of time identifying every job, whether it is essential and non-essential, and what does it take and what is our trigger points to identify our staff and how to get them to work. And this was an all hands on deck. And what was really neat to see last year was that job descriptions, there were no lines, that all city employees jumped in wherever they needed to have and were able to share and help and cross-departmental. So that was interesting to see. So those were some of the highlights of what's happened last year, how we prepare. You know, this year I was listening to the National Weather Service call the other day, and they said this is El Nino year, which means that temperatures are supposed to be higher than normal. But last year was El Nino year as well. So I think all we can do is plan for the best, and when it does happen, that we're able to put our plans into action and take care of business. And I'd just like to close real quick by just saying that, again, this is a city-wide event. It's not a fire department event, that all city departments play a big role in this whole deal. From the planning, from the preparation, from the implementation to staffing the EOC, to doing whatever they had to do. It was just a great exercise for everybody, and one that we learned from stuff and we were able to put in play. So with that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions or make any comments if anybody has anything on our winter weather preparations.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation. It's eye-opening to hear about what you went through and your department went through and what you've done after the fact, and makes us all feel a lot better. Clearly, thank you for all the services that your department gives, and we're very grateful. Council, any questions? Councilmember Nevels.
Chief, I just want to say thank you so much for the presentation. Just so the public has an idea, so you said you guys ran about 700 plus calls on
That's
that.
correct.
What might be a typical call load?
Per day, we're probably running between 25 and 30 emergency calls a day. So that's, that was a little bit higher than normal.
And I think that's important to really illustrate the fact that you guys were working out there and you were working in the elements just to try to keep the public, taken care of, try to keep them as warm as possible, keep them as safe as possible. And I know we really appreciate not only the fire departments, but the entire city's hard work on that. So thank you guys very much.
Thank you. And I want to comment a little bit. Our water department did a phenomenal job. We were able to triage calls, so as a lower impact call would come in, we had some of those guys taking the residential style calls that were coming in. They made hundreds of water leak calls, which freed up the emergency crews to handle priority calls. So it was a great effort that was made.
Well, thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you.
We're hoping that we don't have to go through
El
this
Nino,
again.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. All right, item number 8 is our consent agenda. The consent agenda is routine in nature and is generally enacted in a single motion. These items have been previously approved through the budget or past council actions. Any item may be pulled and considered separately. Full descriptions are available on the screen. We did have a series of questions during work session on item number D, which is the Chamber of Commerce, our Visit Coppell marketing campaign. And fortunately, we have Ellie Braxton Levine, who may have a few comments for us and answer some of the questions. So, Ellie?
Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you so much for allowing me to be here. A lot of people don't understand what a Chamber of Commerce is, and so I'm going to put that really quick and articulate just a little bit. A lot of people think that the Chamber of Commerce is part of the city, but we are not part of the city. We are one of the fortunate cities that have a close working relationship with our city, but we are not part of the city. And then there are some that kind of blur us with education. They think that we're part of that, and we are not part of education. Again, we support education strongly because of our own self-serving reasons that those are the future leaders of our community. So we want to make sure that we have them coming on up. But a Chamber of Commerce is owned solely by the businesses here. We are owned by the businesses here. We are governed by the businesses here, and we serve only to represent the interests of the business community. And with that in mind, we have asked the city to allow us to utilize the hotel occupancy tax that is available to market the city of Coppell. And establish a Visit Coppell program, inviting people to come visit Coppell, do business here, use our art center, visit our farmers market, do business with our restaurants and hotels here. And that's what we have proposed, and that's what this is all about. So who has any questions? All good?
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, absolutely. Ellie, thank you so much for the overview. And I know I was one of the people in the back who asked for additional information. But can you maybe walk us through timing and next steps for how this, contract or proposal will move forward,
All
and
right.
and how it'll benefit our city, our community, our businesses overall?
One of the purest forms of economic development is tourism, because people come here, they spend their money here, and then they go home. We don't have to provide any civil services for them or anything like that. They just bring money into our community. And that's what the hotel occupancy tax is for, is to market a community, the hotels and the restaurants here. We did an RFQ back in November and December to determine the best marketing firm to use for this project, and we have determined what company that would be. Once this is finalized with the city and the contract is in place, then we will move forward with this company starting in February. And we will spend a couple of months developing a brand and a program moving forward of how we actually want to market Coppell. And then you should start seeing actual marketing. There are 8 million people in the Metroplex that we need to market Coppell to that don't really understand that we're here and what we have available. And so that's what the campaign is going to be focused on primarily, is just marketing in the area.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate your time tonight.
All right, thank you.
Council, is there any item that needs to be pulled from the consent agenda and voted on separately? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Mayor Pro Tem Hinojosa Smith.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve consent agenda items A through D.
And seconded by Councilmember Carroll. All in favor?
Long Hinojosa Smith, Carol Neville's John, Matthew Hill in favor. None opposed. The motion carries.
Thank you very much. Item number 9, Ms. Hurley, would you please read the item into the record for us?
Yes, sir. Consider approval of an ordinance amending the expiration date for the sunset review provision in the current short-term rental ordinance found in Chapter 9, Article 9-29, Section 9-29-14 in the City of Coppell Code of Ordinances, and authorizing the mayor to sign. Good evening, Mayor and Council. We're here tonight to talk about the short-term rental ordinance. The first time the short-term rental the first short-term rental ordinance that was passed on June 12th, 2018. And at the time that we passed that ordinance, we knew that we were still learning a lot about short-term rentals. And so we put a review period at the end of 2019 so that we could revisit it to see if any changes were needed. Each iteration of the ordinance we've passed since then has included a sunset review period up until this point. So because the short-term rental industry and issues related to short-term rentals continue to evolve. The current ordinance will sunset on January 31st, 2022. And so due to the tremendous amount of calls and communication we've heard from the community and the continued research that we've done on surrounding short-term rental ordinances, we are asking tonight if we can extend the sunset review period to June 30th of 2022. This will provide us ample time to make the revisions that we need to do, but it will prevent the current level of enforcement from expiring until we can do that. And so if you all approve this item this evening, the only modification to the current ordinance will be the extension of the sunset review period. And then we will bring back the proposed future ordinance at a later date for your consideration. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Council, any questions for Ms. Hurley? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion. Councilmember Long.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve item number 9.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Councilmember Neville. All in favor?
Long, Hinosa Smith, Carol, Neville's, Jen, Matthew Hill in favor, none opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item number 10, Ms. Owens, will you please read the item into the record for us?
Consider approval of a resolution casting a vote for the fourth member of the Board of Directors for the Dallas Central Appraisal District and authorizing the mayor to sign. Good evening, Mayor and Council. The Dallas Central Appraisal District held its election to elect its Board of Directors. There is a runoff needed in order to appoint a fourth member to the board. And in the packet, I did include just a little bit of information about state law, but basically, I tallied up, the votes are tallied, and the runoff is between the top two finishers, which is Michael Hurt of DeSoto and Brett Franks of Saxe. Each of the candidates submitted biographical information for the packet. We also did receive a letter from Mr. Franks, which I included in your packet as well. But if you would like to take action on this, you may, but we don't have a recommendation at this time. It is at the discretion of council.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So our option is we can take no action, or I can entertain a motion for one of the two candidates. Councilmember John.
Thank you, Mayor. Mayor, I know that we did not actually participate in the voting last time, and that's why it is, well, part of us is not voting that they did not, one of the person did not have the 50%, over 50%. But having read some of the packet and the fact that Mr. Frank had included additional information about himself and what he plans on doing, that kind of gives me a better idea as to what maybe the citizens, not just in his district, but also here in Coppell might need. So, you know, by all means, I would like to go ahead and try to go ahead and vote for Mr. Brett Franks.
So you nominate?
I would nominate, yes.
Thank you. We have a nomination for Brett Franks. Is there a second?
Mayor, technically, you don't need a second. If you just vote, if Mr. Franks receives 4 affirmative votes, then that would be casting your ballot. If he does not receive a majority of votes, then it would be denied. You could then vote on Mr. Hurt or take no action. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'd just take a vote on Mr. Franks as our nominee.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
Thank you. All right. So sorry for we've never done this before, so we're breaking new ground. All in favor of nominating Mr. Franks as the City of Coppell's nominee, please say aye. Raise your hand, say aye.
Okay, so Hinosa Smith, Carol, okay, sorry, Neville's, Jen, Matthew, okay.
So that is a majority, and therefore we will be nominating Mr. Franks.
All right, thank you, Mayor and Council, appreciate it.
Thank you. You know, you'd think this gets routine, but there's always something new. All right, item number 12 is item number 11 is the city manager report, project updates and future agendas.
Thank you, Mayor. Council, just I provided this update to you earlier, but as far as the intersection improvements, the projects continue to move forward. And the one difference between the project update from the other day was that we do actually have the permit now from TxDOT on 121 and D&T. So that is in hand. So that's good to start. Beltline, the contractor is doing some work this week. After it's complete, please avoid South Beltline starting next week at all costs. Everyone hear me. Avoid South Beltline, south of Southwestern. So what will happen is the traffic will shift from to the existing northbound lanes, and they'll begin reconstruction on the southbound lanes. So the traffic will occur at Hackberry. Shift will occur at Hackberry north of the 635 Beltline intersection. That way, preserving the capacity of the LBJ intersection is really important. So eventually we'll get into that. Plantation, the one-way has occurred. There was a write-up in the local newspaper about that, about all the signage and everything associated with it, but that seems to have helped in that situation. The infamous Stream G6 construction is complete, and the Parker Hollywood outfall, the outfall is substantially complete, and the contractor has started working on the Parker outfall. So we should be completed in about the next 2 to 3 months, weather permitting, with El Nino. So that's all I have, Mayor.
Thank you very much. And item number 12 is the mayor and council reports. We do have our State of the City, which is going to be held at 11:30 a.m. on Thursday, January 13th. This is hosted by the Chamber of Commerce and will be at the Coppell Arts Center. Catering is going to be by Jay Macklin's Grill. We will review the 2022 vision for the city, take questions from the audience, and everyone is invited to attend. Our staff has put quite a bit of time in the presentation with a lot of thought, and the content is really good. Just a further note, the City of Coppell's administrative offices will be closed in observance of Martin Luther King Day on January 17th. Does anybody have anything to add? Oh, yes, thank you. We do have a joint meeting with the Future-Oriented Approach to Residential Development Board at 6 p.m. at the library. So we will be meeting as a joint board and council tomorrow night. And in addition to that, we have our council retreat, which will be held at Life Safety Park on the 21st and 22nd, starting at 5:30 p.m. on Friday evening. Item number 13, public service announcements concerning items of community interest with no council action or deliberation permitted. Is there any public service announcements that we have? No? Item number 14 is necessary action from the executive session. There was none. We did not finish our work session. We had one item left, so the option is before us now to go back into work session, or I have been advised that the presentation was going to be completely the memo that was included in our packet, and so we can go back there and read the memo, or we can go home and read it. So it's kind of the choice is up to the group.
Do you prefer? Do I have to make a motion?
No, you do not. I'm not seeing a burning desire to go back and read a memo, so I think we'll consider work session to be concluded. That being said, there being no further business before the council, we are adjourned at 8:19 p.m. Oh, God, thank you.